Thank you for joining us. We will get started in a minute. We're just giving folks a chance to log on. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome to United Policyholders Roadmap to Recovery webinar. Today, we will be talking about wildfire prepared rebuilding methods and materials. My name is Amy Bach, and I'm very pleased to be joined by UP team members Valerie Brown and then Carolyn Winter, who helped you get signed up, and then our guest experts Barry Rosengrant and Carrie Keel. So we're gonna get started here. For those of you who may be not familiar with our organization, we're a 501c3, a not-for-profit like the Sierra Club or the Red Cross, that we don't sell anything. We are in business to be helpful specifically with regard to insurance and disaster recovery. We have been doing this work for 30 years. We don't take money from the insurance industry, but we have a lot of expertise in what it takes to navigate a fair settlement of an insurance claim, particularly in the aftermath of a disaster when there's a lot of money at stake. We're bringing you this program this afternoon through something called the Roadmap to Recovery. That's one of our 3 programs. We refer to Team Up as our staff and our government and nonprofit partners. Our volunteers, both Barry and Carrie are volunteers today. And some of the programs that we offer, in addition to classes like the one that you're listening to now, are our survivor to survivor forums. We've got one later today, as a matter of fact, which is a way for you, if you've been impacted by a disaster, to virtually be with other people in your situation who are navigating the road to recovery, as well as trained volunteers with our organization who themselves lost a home in a previous wildfire or other disaster, got help from us, and are now paying that forward by helping you. Survivor to Survivor is an informal place, not so much to get expert advice from professionals, but to get expert advice from other people, ideas, support, comfort, empathy, creative ideas. And then our Team Up also includes a lot of professionals that have expertise that's relevant to you if you're on a recovery journey. So CPAs that can help with taxes, lawyers, damage estimators. So those are all the resources that we have pulled together under our Roadmap to Recovery umbrella. Okay, so we run 3 programs, like I said. Today we're here talking about recovery, but some of the things we're going to be talking about today are informed by work that we're doing through another program called the Roadmap to Preparedness. And that is figuring out what households and communities can do to reduce risk, to be more resilient. And then we are working to turn that knowledge into standards so that if you do things to reduce risk, if you rebuild with an eye toward resiliency, your home will be easier to insure. You will get some sort of preferred pricing, or, in this era where insurers are getting a little reluctant to insure homes in wildland urban interface areas, having your home be a wildfire prepared home will really help you. And not just with regard to insurance. Obviously, help prevent your home from being damaged or destroyed. And then we do a lot of advocacy work because some of the problems people have after disasters are hard to solve on the ground, such as underinsurance. This is just a reminder, you know, we're a consumer organization and we talk a lot about self-help, right? We're here to help you be your own best advocates because of course you've already paid for good claim service when you bought your insurance. And sometimes you need to kind of be a squeaky wheel to get what you paid for. So this is just our basic guidance on how to be that squeaky wheel. When you're communicating with your insurance company, these are the best practices that we recommend. And it's relevant to the conversation today because we're going to be talking about construction materials and methods that you might want to use on a rebuild that are different from what you had in the old home. And the reason that it matters to sort of think about these best practices is because the dynamic of you with your insurance company and the fact that they will, if an insurance company thinks that you're trying to get them to pay for a better, bigger house, that's going to knock your negotiations off track, and that can make it very hard to get a settlement. So because we're going to be talking about replacing your home a little different than how it was, we're going to give you some perspective and some guidance on how you deal with that with the adjuster, right? And that is these points here, okay? Because again, you got to remember the dynamic that you're realistically in when you're trying to extract a large sum of money from a big business, and their representative that you're working with is usually pretty low down in the chain of authority at that business. So a lot of what we want to help you understand is the strategy of how to approach an adjuster when you're asking them to do something that they're not used to doing. And they may not be familiar with some of these techniques and materials we're going to be talking about. So this is just a reminder that our special guests here are volunteers. We're not here to create some sort of professional relationship. So you've already heard the names of the folks that you'll be hearing from today. That's me pre-COVID. Now I'm wearing glasses. My hair is long, all that stuff. But I'm one of the co-founders of the organization, and I'm an insurance consumer advocate. I've been doing that for my whole career, so well over 35 years. And my colleague Val Brown, who is our senior program officer, a lot of expertise in the subject that we're going to be talking about today. And as you can see at the bottom of her, the list of her qualifications, she's a home ignition zone instructor. Val, do you want to tell us what that means?
Yeah, so this is something that Steve Carell and IBHS had rolled out in the early 2010s. And the idea was, how do we protect homes from ember ignition and just basically creating that safe space. So it had the home and the home site, and it's a lot of it's the basis for when we're talking about our RAP mitigation standards. That home ignition zone it was the first attempt nationwide to kind of aggregate all of that stuff into one space and one program to help people better protect themselves.
So we got a question, what is IBHS? And that stands for the Institute for Home and Business Safety. It's a research and a think tank based in Florida that actually does testing on homes. So they have like a huge barn, and they have these huge blowers, and they subject they build like a demo house, and then they subject it to like hurricane force winds and try to figure out how to keep the roof from flying off. And they are starting to do it with wildfires as well. So IBHS, they set standards. They're supported by the insurance industry. So that's what IBHS is. And we have been working very closely with their people because insurance companies will listen to them. And so IBHS is an important part of the puzzle here. So Carrie Keel is with High Caliber Construction in Paradise. Welcome, Carrie. Thank you for joining us. So, so Carrie had, for those of you, you probably know now the phrase stick-built construction. It stands for your traditional construction. And so Carrie, just give us a little thumbnail on your history and your company.
Yeah, I'm a general contractor. Normally I do development and building, more like spec houses, but since the fire, we've been doing strictly stick builts, and we're also doing, which do have the insulated concrete forms, but we're doing structurally insulated panels. And
So, I'm sorry.
they're about 70% more energy efficient, and so that's a big draw there. And so yeah, before that, previously I worked for the County of Sonoma in their facilities department, and spent several years as a capital project manager for the county architect's office.
Okay. So, so for we'll get back to some more of the terminology, but for those of you who have joined us from outside of California, so Paradise is the town that was decimated in 2018 in what's called the Camp Fire. So Carrie lives in that community. So she has had ground zero experience in the construction professionals' ability to meet this crazy high demand that suddenly came into her community, where there were 18,000 structures that were destroyed, and obviously it's a small city, so not nearly enough builders, and all kinds of things have happened. Many stories not to be told here, but Carrie is an example of a community-based builder who has been navigating her community's recovery and has a lot to share in terms of best practices. Barry Rosengrant, his wife's not with us right now, might join us, but Barry is are you a California native, Barry?
I was transplanted in 1966 to California, which makes me a native.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you guys were you went through the 2017, the fires in Sonoma, or just camp?
No, we, Coralie actually had, I think, great-grandmother, who was one of the founders. There are streets named after her long-term relatives, and she spent every summer visiting there. And so when she had an opportunity, moved there, and on Honeyview Terrace, and Carrie knows where that is. It's a lovely site. But we never would have made it out had we not been called to Sonoma because of their fire, and the fact that one of the planning people, an engineer, read an article about what we had done and said, we need to talk. So we drove over there with only the clothes on our back the day before the fire. And Coralie said, she's a married family therapist and had a lot of former associates in Santa Rosa, said, I want to see a couple of my friends. Let's just stay overnight with only the clothes on our back. Next morning, we were driving back and we were told, don't come. They were.
That's for sure.
So you lost a home in Paradise where Carrie is.
Oh yeah.
And then since then you've relocated to Idaho,
Yes.
But your business, E-Tech Homes, is bringing new material technology and construction systems, and you also have expertise in some of the techniques and materials that you recommend people incorporate in a rebuild if they live in a wildfire-prone region. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And it should, with your input, Amy, we're looking for insurance companies who ought to give a break to a fireproof home.
Yep. Yep.
And
Well,
my personal background is high rise. I was a corporate consultant and occasionally would cause a building to be built for them, but mostly put them in high rises. So I learned a lot about high rises. And so 1880, the first non-load bearing wall bearing high rise was built with a frame, and that has not been changed since, with either concrete or steel frames. And so we kept asking ourselves, why doesn't somebody build a home with a steel frame? It's predictable, it goes up quickly, the roof goes on almost immediately, gets the workers out of the weather, and so on. But most importantly, from the contractor standpoint, it gives them predictable costs, because good friends of mine say they don't know what the cost is till the last nail is driven, which drives them crazy. So,
yeah, well, we're gonna talk about that, because obviously the big challenge I think a lot of people have is not having enough insurance, and so Carrie is going to talk a little bit about how she was able to get the per square foot costs down for some of her projects. But I'm guessing that with the steel frame approach, that people will have questions about cost. So let's get into a little bit of meat before we get to that point. Okay, so we're here to talk about wildfire prepared rebuilding, methods and materials, and incorporating the costs into your rebuild. You've heard us talk about incorporating wildfire resiliency standards, and not for two reasons, right? One is to keep your home from getting damaged or destroyed again. And then the other is to qualify for, to be able to keep insurance at a price you can afford. So those are kind of our two themes today. This is just an image to show you what our organization has learned, and what sort of the general knowledge of some of the basics, that how important the roof is, that it be a non-combustible material, and the ideally siding as well. Defensible space, you see there, 0 to 5 at a minimum. And then some of the things that people do or have conditions that we know to not be helpful in fire prevention. One is having a fence, wood or vinyl, that's connected to the home. It acts like a wick, so that we want to avoid. And then obviously the concept of leaving enough room out around the perimeter of the home for either firefighters to save your home, but also to prevent, as you heard Val mention earlier, embers from getting into the home. So so I'm just going to give a very quick recap from prior workshops that we've hosted on how should you be negotiating with your insurer if you want to incorporate materials and techniques that were not part of the destroyed dwelling that your insurer insured. Okay, so we talk a lot about how important it is to scope and estimate the as-was, the house that you lost, and reach an agreement with the insurance company. And we say that because it is the best way for minimizing conflicts, delays, fighting, litigation, but it's something that often doesn't happen. So what happens a lot of the time is your adjuster comes out, they are now trained to use a program, Xactimate, they give you an offer, you talk to some builders in the area and they say that no way could I put that house up for what that computer estimated, right? So we try to help you figure out, all right, how do you overcome that problem? And that is by getting the the scope of the loss, meaning size, quantity of materials, quality of materials, and estimating, pricing, all those things for a as-was project. And the reason it often doesn't happen right is because hardly anyone wants to put back the same exact house that they had. That almost never happens, right? Barry's smiling. Like almost everybody wants to build bigger, smaller, different, didn't like the ranch or did once of one story, too many stairs, not enough, exactly. But insurance adjusters are trained that they only owe what was, not what you want, but what was. So we preach this gospel over and over that you got to get to it, an agreement on that, what was, even if you're not intending to rebuild it. And it's tricky because, builders are in short supply, high demand after wildfires, right? And they generally don't have time to estimate a project that no one's going to build, right? They're busy estimating projects that people want to build, right? But you need to reach that agreement with your insurance company before you can do anything. So these are the 3 points I just kind of wanted to throw out there first. So as scoping and estimating the as-was is essential to settling your dwelling insurance claim fairly. It's essential in negotiating substitute materials and methods. And this standard that's in your policy, it may say we pay for like, kind, and quality, or it may say equivalent construction, but whatever it says, we're here to suggest to you and help you put your best foot forward to your insurance company and say, the cost of putting back a stronger, more resilient house is very close to what it would cost to put back the old house. So why don't you just settle with us so that we can go ahead and put back a more resilient home? So that's basically what we're here to do. Okay, so just a brief review. For more details on navigating a fair settlement on your claim and those terms I talked about, scope and estimate, we go a lot deeper in another webinar. We're not going to go into great detail. I'm just skimming the surface here. This is just review, right? So figuring out how much you have available to you to possibly build this more resilient home. You want to add up everything you have, including, if you have it, extended replacement, and also code upgrade coverage, right? It takes a little bit of math. If you are there and you feel like at this point what your max available benefits are, great. If you don't, I recommend that you go back and watch a previous webinar where we just talk about navigating a settlement on your dwelling claim. So this is just in a sample to show you this person, and the sample has both extended replacement. So on top of their 300,000 there, they have another 50% or 150% of that. So, and this person also has code upgrades. This is just a sample. In California, you're allowed to combine your coverages for other structures and your dwelling, which can help if you're underinsured. If you have this extended replacement coverage, again, it gives you a bump up, more dollars than the basic coverage. And this is just to show you what your policy might, if you have extended replacement, how that wording might be, okay? Same thing goes with code upgrade. If you don't have it in your home then you don't have it. But if you do have it, it's another bump up. It's another bucket of money. California now mandates 10% for code upgrade coverage, but that didn't kick in until this year. And it's only California. All right. This is sort of a typical policy, the way it talks about building ordinance or law. State Farm policies talk about it as option OL. Other policies use similar language. It's going to either say building code or ordinance or law. And if you live in California and you lost your home in 2021 and your insurer is saying you don't have code upgrade coverage, then you need to file a complaint with the Department of Insurance because the law says you're supposed to have 10%. Okay, but that's only for people in California who lost their homes this year. Okay, that's another sample of a code, and this is just to help you figure out, if you haven't already, whether or not you have those bumps. Okay, and again, in California, you can combine whatever you have for other structures with your dwelling coverage. All right, that typically other structures will be your garages, retaining walls, decks, walkways, outbuildings, barns. And this is where you would find that coverage. All right. So just to wrap up on this point, if you are still negotiating with your insurer on what they owe from the as was, these are some of the things that matter and sources for you. So if you have building plans, photos, public records, and then the things that really matter in terms of the price of the project are going to be the components, right? And there's dollars in those details, which is why we recommend that you watch if you haven't already, our webinar on navigating a settlement of your dwelling loss. This is just another suggestion on how you could, if you're still kind of going back and forth with your insurer on what they owe on the old place. These are some free sources of information that might help you. Okay, so we've covered just that basic perspective of how the negotiations may be going. We have to take our deep breath here. Okay.
Amy, can I interrupt you for a second?
Please do, Barry.
You didn't mention the most important thing you do. You give someone who's under tremendous stress and want to escape that stress any way they can, and they settle because they don't have the courage that you provide. And you make sense out of things that they're totally bewildered about. And I've been around construction a few years. It's easy when you're telling somebody else what to do, not so easy when you're going through it yourself. And you bring sanity to this process, and that's the single most important thing you do.
Well, thank you.
You saved us years probably, and lots of thousands of dollars, and friends who were subject to the same problems settled quickly and have paid terribly for doing that. And we have recommended you and your firm, I don't know how many times, because you bring something to the party that just isn't provided, and you bring sanity to the process. And that's the most important thing you do.
Well, Barry, we thank you, and we try. That is our goal, is to demystify the process and keep breaking it down for people so that it makes some sense. I mean, some parts of it don't make sense, right? Why does the insurance industry need to put people through these hoops? But that is, sometimes it's the way it is. So thank you for that. So, okay, we're going to get into now a little bit about the things that we know that make that difference between a wildfire prepared home and just a regular home. So Val, you want to talk a little bit here about what we know now and where we are in the process of getting standards in place that insurance companies will have to recognize.
Yeah, so with our WRAP group, our Wildfire Risk Reduction and Asset Protection program, we've been doing the work as Amy shared. So we've been working on this a year and a half at this point, Amy, right?
Yep.
Taking the work that UP had done with the tree mortality task force. And, you know, because this is a common problem across the West, you know, how do you, with us all sharing this risk of wildfire, the idea that, you know, and people facing the idea that insurance is suddenly becoming not affordable and not accessible, you know, we need to flip that paradigm. And so we've been working in this space to identify those methods and materials that for people who, you know, who currently have a home, to be able to, you know, to protect it for the future and get that consideration for that. So we've worked up those standards, which, you know, are actually the basis for what we're going to be talking about today, because it's the same process. It's just, you know, whether you're building or you're renovating or remodeling or mitigating to protect your home. So we've identified the materials and methods. We've got our standards developed. We're working very hard to get them embedded as official. You can see underneath that red line, this is 13 effective mitigation actions, where we are. And we're working with currently with the state of California's Department of Insurance to get insurers to incentivize and reward you for maintaining those standards. And then we're, you know, with our work with our partner in Colorado, you know, doing that same work, and with Amy's work nationally with the insurance commissioners, you know, the work we do here we'll be able to leverage to states across the nation. So it's an exciting time for UP, and that we're making, you know, instead of railing against the fact that this is not happening, we just kind of took the bull by the horns and moved it forward. So very excited to be in this space right now. And as you can see, in some insurers are already rewarding people, offering discounts. And so they can see that writing on the wall that they need to be part of the solution. You know, this is not a, you know, if you know, we're just going to drop you. They're there to provide a product. We need that product, and we all really do have to work together in this space.
Yeah, and I just want to mention something very interesting that somebody happened here. Sorry about that audio. I'm not sure what's going on here. Somebody in the chat posted a link. If you're listening in and you're in Oregon, the legislature just provided some incentive funding for fire hardening measures. And we posted the link there in the chat. Hopefully you can see that. I'm not sure that everyone can see that. Carolyn, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Can the attendees see the link that's in the chat, or do we need to put that in the Q&A?
They can see the link that's in the chat.
Okay, great. So this is just another source of possible funding if you have a gap in financing your project.
Right, and some jurisdictions, some governments, some local governments are doing it. Some bonds have been passed in certain counties. Some utilities are offering these. So, you know, do take advantage of any funding resource out there to make this happen for you.
Yes. Okay. So let's get to what are some of the materials that we know about that are worth implementing in your build.
Yeah, so we started with the is the previous slide we had that had the 13 mitigation steps. This actually outlines them, and because like I said, we're basing this work on the mitigations that that will protect your home no matter what. So a roof is so important, a Class A roof. You know, that could be a terracotta roof, that could be a metal roof, you know, the traditional shingles, the heavier ones, all of these things matter. We've got, you know, there's guidelines for gutters with a metal drip cap, you know, sealing the gaps. Vents are incredibly important. Vents for the WUI, the wildlife, wildland urban interface, are, you know, the requirement there is a certain size and density. There are some vents that far exceed that and actually have baffling and other materials in there to break up embers that would go into your house, which is a, you know, it's a step above and beyond Fences, again, just being careful with those pieces. Amy, if you can go to the next slide. And the next four actions, decks, again, no combustible materials beneath them. Any other structures attached, non-combustible materials. Any buildings less than 25 feet away from your dwelling or the decking, needs to be rated for a 1 hour fire rating and include non-combustible cladding. Windows are important. Either that dual pane glass, you want tempered glass, or they want to have a deployable metal shutter. That's important. The fire that impacted my community in 2007, people with aluminum windows, they just melted in and fell in. So you want to make sure that you're putting in materials that are going to protect you. And Carrie, if I can pick on you for just a second here, when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned with roofs, the fact that the labor cost is the labor cost, and that drives most of the cost of putting on a roof. And so when you're looking at a roof, putting on those thicker shingles, the 50-year rated roof versus, yes, because the cost is basically the same.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's a very small amount, because shingles are shingles. They're still putting the same number of shingles in. So, and metal roofs, depending on your budget, they can run anywhere from 1/3 to 100%. They can double your cost. And
right, and the same with the terracotta. Yeah, it's
right.
expensive.
So
so
it's not feasible for everyone.
But they they do not require replacement every 25 years, the metal.
Right, but if you've got options, you could put a 50-year shingle on, you could do a metal roof, you could do the terracotta. It really just depends on what your budget is, but right. Being aware, maximizing as much as you can.
Your budget. And I mean, I would just personally highly recommend what we do on our houses, especially the ones we're rebuilding that we own, is we're going as energy efficient and as, class A, everything that we can do for safety, and going cheaper on things like appliances, countertops, carpet, which can always be upgraded later. It's just a good way to spend your money. If you have a choice of a metal roof versus, $20 a yard carpet, you might want to go with something, that you can replace in 5 years that you can afford.
Yeah. Amy, can you go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
And this is just a quick slide. This is very important because this is that wildland urban interface, those codes that are all focused, this section especially is all focused on protecting the envelope of the house you build so that flames do not come in, so that you keep your house standing. So the next slide. And so here, as I was talking about roofs, these are some of the examples of those Class A roofs that are going to better protect your home. Box eaves, the gutter guards. Just keeping these things in mind. And just Barry and Carrie, as we're going through these slides, if you've got something you want to point out on these points, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, I will say one thing that we're doing on our houses now is we're metal covering our fascias, and it slips up under the drip guard on the roofing. So your roof goes on, it kind of counter flashes, goes down and wraps the fascia either to your hardy board or your whatever, but that leaves zero wood exposed.
Exactly, which is key. Yes. All right, and then these are examples of the vents. Like I said, the WUI code calls out, a certain diameter size, and these are 3 that the state of California recommends that basically exceed. So they each have a different patent technology to protect you. I know, Carrie, when you're building houses, instead of just doing the straight mesh, you're doing. I remember you're doing at least one of these brands, right?
Yeah, we're doing the ones that actually melt and make a solid barrier.
So that no embers can come into the house.
Yeah, when it reaches a certain ambient temperature, it becomes just like a solid piece. And you can retrofit those too. We kind of just get, I mean, supplies have been so weird. You just need how many you need and you order them from whoever has them that, that meet, local and state, building code.
Right, right. Because you want to meet or exceed. Yes. All right, next slide. And so, and Carrie, this is actually a house you're building. So I'll let you talk about this technology.
Yeah, this house here is a structurally insulated panel. It's built on a standard foundation. Foundation is insulated as well as concrete. So you've got insulation both sides. And then the panels are set, they're 8 by 24 foot. And then it's stuccoed on the outside. And they basically, it's very low cost square footage. We stick built the roof on this. You can also do the panels on the roof, but basically you've got like 70% less to heat and cool a house like this. And it's all Class A. I mean, the windows are, all double pane, low E, all of that, and tempered, anything that's low. Class A roof, Class A on the siding. And, we're coming in at about, the company that actually provides the panels for us, they're doing turnkey for about $190 a square foot, which is pretty low. And so anyway, that kind of addresses the, the Title 24 as well as the WUI that you're, kind of encompassing all that together. Been a fun process. It's really good.
Yeah, it was a neat house to see, and you can see on there's the.
Oh, did
the
you
photo
stop by and look at it?
Yeah, no, I went by and stalked and took photos. Yeah, walked through. It was just neat to see, and it gets to the point of what you said. Spending your money on that envelope of the house, and you can finish it and then do your renovations and updates later. But to get you home and get you in a safe home, I think is important.
Yeah, and that's kind of the approach we're taking, because we did lose 8 rentals in the fire, and we also need to be able to build them at a cost that we can charge a rent that's not exorbitant, because so many people in these kind of wildfire situations, if they've got a standing house, people are renting houses for 3 times what they were, in 2018. And I don't know, I'm just not down with that. That just seems wrong. So we're trying to keep our building costs where we can actually rent, at a reasonable market value of our building cost.
Well, and with this and some of the other technologies we're looking at, because they're not a traditional stick built, there's actually a time savings on some of these as well, as far as getting them up, which is very helpful for like our folks in Colorado who are got a very abbreviated building season, right?
Right. Well, this house actually, these go up in 3 weeks for envelope.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we got 2 questions. If either of you, Carrie or Barry, are up for answering. One is, does anyone know anything about Tesla solar roofs?
They're in early stages. There are certain partners with Tesla that are experimenting at this point. I don't think the product is yet ready for prime time, but it should make sense long term.
Yeah, that's my understanding too.
Okay, and then, is stucco financially good in Oregon? I'm not sure what that means. Maybe I don't know what that means. Maybe
it's probably with the moisture, because they get a lot more rain there. Yeah.
And then what about cement outside covering? It looks like wood, but made out of cement.
That would be LP makes one. It's got like a wood grain to it. Comes in
Hardy has
4 by
one.
8s.
Hardy board is another
Hardy
one.
board, yeah.
Yeah, hardy board or LP side are the two that are most prevalent.
Yeah, and those are used across the nation. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are good options there. Yeah.
And also
Okay.
going with the, they do make a 5/4 trim, which is fatter. And so you're getting a lot more concrete. It not only looks better, but it's also, you know, you've got a thicker piece of concrete. Because the trim comes the same.
Another question, it's sort of related. I wonder whether using hardy plank cement wood siding is as protective as stucco from a fire code perspective.
I don't know what the tests are, but you know, it really depends on the fire, because like the campfire burned so hot, things were spontaneously combusting. Stucco held up, you know, better than anything. Our whole court is all stucco, closed soffits, except for one house that was wood. They're all still standing because I didn't actually lose my home. I just lost my incomes. And I mean, the lap siding, I mean, it's all, you know, it's just nailed on the top side. So it's just overlapping. I mean, you know, I think it protects from, you know, ignition, from, you know, wind and some embers and stuff like that, and like direct contact. But stucco is probably, in my personal opinion and what I've observed here, is the stucco homes, even some of the old ones, that, because I think we had about 1,000 homes survive, almost all those are stucco. You know, just standard, you know, stucco.
The smoother the exterior can be, including roofs. One of the problems with roof shingles is it provides a place for an ember to land and then burn a hole through to the attic.
Absolutely.
To melt it through. So smooth is better. Anytime you create additional texture, embers love it.
Yeah, they hide in there, right?
They do.
Thank you, George Philbeck. A note to Colorado viewers: hardy plank is not viable at higher altitudes where there are massive temperature swings as they crack and powder. Anything notable there, Barry? You're in Idaho.
I've never heard that complaint ever.
Oh, interesting.
Nor have I.
Interesting.
And we're at 2,500 feet. I mean, we're not real high altitude, and I have it on my house in Almanor, and that's 5,000 feet. So I don't know what altitude, but
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely check with your local builders to see what's viable, yeah, in your area.
totally.
Yeah, our next slide is, you know, these are materials. So, so there's autoclaved aerated concrete. This is an example of that. Carrie, I think you've seen this house in Paradise, correct?
Yeah, I've seen several houses of that style being put together. I'm not super familiar with them, and a lot of the companies are also using the insulated concrete foundation. But what I don't get about those is they're doing a standard stick-built roof. And if you're doing a standard stick-built roof, then you go back to what Barry was talking about. You get something on the roof, it's going to burn through. So you're going to have your walls, but you're not going to have your roof system. You know, so I mean, it's a lot of money to do poured, you know, basically poured concrete walls. The houses turn out super nice, but I don't know, without doing that roof in a totally non-combustible surface, they kind of don't make a heck of a lot of sense to me personally. But the other thing we noticed here is the houses with the steeper roof pitches did better also, because the steeper the roof pitch, some things like small branches and stuff, if there were gutter guards, it actually rolled off the roof. So pretty much hardly anyone builds less than 6 and 12 here because of our snow load. But the houses with, you know, 6 and 12 and up that did have gutter guards, there was a lot of debris around the perimeters that just shed off.
Yeah, that makes sense.
By the way, back to this hardy plank debate, we have another person commenting that they've used hardy plank extensively at 7,000 feet and it worked fine for years. So I think there's a little bit of a of a debate going on about that. Okay, we also have a question about 3D printed houses. Is that anything either of you have anything to say about, Carrie or Barry?
I've watched it being developed at the University of Southern California for the last, I'd say 15 years in secret, so to speak. I personally think that it's, if you're going to pour a whole bunch of look-alike houses, that's the way to do it. But oftentimes people don't like to look like every other neighbor.
Right. The autoclave, I went to watch a demonstration of the product in Sonoma about, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, and I thought it was fascinating. And you know, if you are interested in that, there are I think there are 3 houses, Carrie, you said, that are either close to completion in Paradise that use that.
Yeah, I've seen some that are that look very much like that they've been working on. Not sure if it's the same contractor, but we've got a ton of not common building methods here that are kind of coming in, and you know, so it's kind of cool because not everything's the same. And
yeah, I mean, I think this really does touch again on that point I was making earlier about, you know, some of this is uncharted territory, meaning we're learning as fast as we can about what houses withstand wildfires and which ones don't make it. We're all doing, I mean, those of us who are, you know, in this space trying to be helpful, you know, are open to new ideas and new technology. But, you know, you got to remember that insurance adjusters are trained to be very much by the book. So some of what your challenge is when you want to build a more resilient home is to be able to convince the adjuster that they're not going to be spending more money than they would just to replace exactly what you had, and or that you're not trying to, you know, you're not trying to soak the insurer. So a lot of his challenge for folks is just explaining that it's apples to apples in terms of cost. If you can, that may not always be possible.
Right. Or what you said earlier, Amy, going for trying to get the settlement on what was and getting that agreement. And then once you've got it, you know, you're contracting and building. Yeah. Because that's always your first hit.
Right.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't care what you do, as long as you spend up, you know, up until, and that's, you know, we you know, this process of getting, if your insurer cuts you a big check and then you put it into an escrow account with a bank, or you have a mortgage and the mortgage company has an escrow account, and you've got to establish progress milestones in order to get your insurer to pay more or for the money to get released. Again, you're going to have to be able to, you know, to be either your own advocate to say, yeah, we're doing this innovative approach, but it's still apples to apples. So Barry, you want to tell us what we're looking at here?
The building on the left is a studio for an architect built on the side hill. It's on columns, and we put magboard under the SIP, and we're very SIP, we're pro SIP, and we're working with somebody.
Can we go back and say what SIP is again, just in case, because we had
the magboard, because it's open in the bottom on a side hill up near Mulholland Drive, fire could come under it. And so we didn't want to have the SIP, which is combustible, exposed to flame. So we covered it with magnesium board, and which is fire. I don't know whether anything on earth is really fireproof,
right,
but it's highly fire resistant.
Oops, sorry.
And so the other is a more conventional house. It is stucco with other materials, much more custom, more expensive. The more custom you get, the more potential mistakes, because good labor, as Carrie knows now, the master carpenters left in '08, I think. So it's hard
A
to
lot
find.
of them.
Yeah, it's hard to find somebody who can put together, especially in stick built. With our product, it all comes pre-sized, no waste. And stick built does have that as something to consider. And talent does tell. So our system doesn't require the same degree of talent as stick built does.
Mhm.
So
That's
you-
like
I'm
the
sorry, I
SIPs too.
So again, SIP, structural, what is it again?
Structurally insulated panels.
structural insulated panel. It's oriented strand board, which was invented up the hill from Paradise, up at Sterling City. It was invented there by Georgia Pacific. And it used to be oriented strand board, and now it's chips. But it's very effective with an insulation thickness that you can specify to meet whatever your code requirement is.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, Barry, because I mean, part of building with these resilient materials, it's not just wildfire protection, it's energy efficiency. There's a lot of benefits baked into these steps that you take.
As Carrie knows more than any contractor that you typically deal with, especially when you do infill. If you do 80 acres of homes, you can set up a factory and just pop them up.
That's
Move
right.
the crews from one to the other, to the other, to the other. When you're doing infill and trying to keep on schedule with sometimes the subs who don't show up when they promise that they'll come, it can drag on. And so with us, we have simplified the system so it's time is money. And we can save a lot of money typically. And my sense of it is that Carrie, as a developer, is much more efficiency oriented than many contractors are.
Indeed.
Yeah, we had somebody in the chat asking if we could, if you have more thoughts and views on ICF, and if you can remind our viewers what ICF is.
Oh, insulated concrete foundations?
I
Yeah,
think it's the next slide.
okay, perfect.
Oh, wait,
Uh,
maybe it's after that one. I'm
All
not
right,
sure
well,
where it
we'll
is.
get to that. Let's get to this
That's
one.
mud. I don't know anything about mud.
Let's hear
No,
about
no, no.
Val.
So
Whose name
so
is
it,
Mud.
yes, my name is Mud. Sorry, I thought ICF was the next slide. So this product is Adobe Bricks, and so it's taking the true Adobe walls that the Pueblo Indians and others used to use for. So they're taking that old technology, and so I think this is UC Davis is researching this now. There's actually a company in Pennsylvania, and I think one in Kentucky that is actually making these bricks locally. And so it's one of those things where they're willing to share their technology to get other people to do it, because they're looking for sustainable, in the face of climate change and looking at energy efficiency, they're looking at old technologies that are helpful. And so this is one that's just coming up. The information about that is all here at on the link on the website. But just wanted to call this out because it's not new. It's an old technology that's being repurposed for this specific purpose.
Rammed earth.
Yes, that's another one. And,
Yeah.
some of the houses that survived the 2020 CZU fire were straw bale with the packed earth around it. And so there were, there was other, a lot of people are going back to that for energy efficiency, but they're finding it has those other benefits.
Well, we had a volunteer years ago after the actually lost her home in 2007 and got very into the straw bale construction. But I think I haven't heard much take up of it. But that's interesting that some of them were found to be still standing after a fire. So okay, so all right, building with non-combustible materials.
And ICF there should have been a slide for that. So my apologies. I think that's on the other deck. So that would be one of these technologies here. So
Okay.
the TRISA panel is just it's a modular system that you put together and you blow concrete on it. Bone is a Canadian-based home builder that these are technologies similar to what Barry's company is doing, and they're looking for that prefabricated metal building with other components to make it work. And then Duracell is just a wall material that's flame resistant. So if Barry and Carrie wanted to talk about ICF, I think definitely it's definitely worth talking about. I think there are 30 houses in Paradise rebuilding with it right now.
Yeah, and the SIPs use an ICF too, because the 4-foot basement is also, that's what gives you your energy efficiency, is having basically it's really cool. It comes in blocks, it's modular. And when you stack your foam blocks, it's already got the racks for the rebar. It really cuts time down, and you clip your rebar in, you fill it up, but the foam is your form. And you can either build standard construction on top of it, you can do SIP, or you can just continue going all the way up with it. So it's pretty neat. It's labor saving, it's energy efficient. And you don't have all the waste, you don't have the form boards. I mean, it really changes. It kind of addresses a lot of things. Construction waste, Title 24, and fire resistant, because then it gets stuccoed or it gets hardy board over it or whatever, stone. And but yeah, we have I know there's 3 or 4 of the ICF that they took all the way up and then put trusses on, and they did them over in the center of town, and they turned out really nice.
Mm-hmm. What about availability? I mean, Barry, steel?
Well, steel is probably the most sustainable in that you recycle by melting it and using it over and over again. And steel has not gone out of sight as far as cost is concerned, along with lumber, which is coming back into, I think,
reality.
Yeah, it's coming back a little bit closer. The prime advantage of steel is it doesn't take as much material because it's so strong, and it goes up so quickly. Just bolt it together and it's up. Now, we certainly did not invent making structures out of steel. I'm not talking about high rise. That's a different steel mentality. I-beams are difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So we use tubes, and they're lightweight and easier to handle. But the real cost is time. The banks do not give loans free. And if there's a delay for any reason, if the components, if the various materials don't arrive when they should, that stretches the time out. So by having things come out of factories that do stamp out materials all day long, keep very expensive machines busy, which builders have a hard time paying for equipment and keeping it busy. And so the time is probably, and the strength is what steel brings to the party.
Okay. All righty.
And it doesn't burn. It melts, but it doesn't burn.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Right. Okay. Before we get actually, have we covered materials? Is there anything else, Barry, Carrie, or Val, on materials that we want to hit?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. And you know, some people have been asking, are we going to post the slides? We absolutely will. And when we post them, we will make sure to put contact information for Barry and Carrie in the deck, so you can reach them. All right, so Val, we're going to now get to methods and what we know about rebuilding in WUI areas.
Right. So the big thing, so methods is focusing on the steps you can take to protect. And one of the biggest ones is, where do you site your house? You know, depending on, you know, where, what vegetation trees are left, what the slopes are around you. That siting of your property is key to make sure you're building in the safest place possible on your property. And it's not something that most people look at when you're building. You're thinking about replacing what you had. You're looking at your buildable envelope of your land, and you're not looking at where, but that siting can make or break. I have a friend who lost 2 fires in our community 4 years apart, rebuilt on the same place, so he had the great view. When he rebuilt the 3rd time, he ended up building a stone wall to basically give him a break to protect the house from the flames coming up the hill, because he just happened to be in a place where that was an issue. So knowing what your risks are on your site is key. And then this is going back to our mitigations that we were talking about earlier. The defensible space in your landscaping, as Carrie was mentioning earlier, you know, she's using metal cladding, so that non-combustible material, you know, having 6 inches at least between the ground and the exterior siding of the dwelling, so that you don't have a place where embers can catch or flames can reach. That 5 feet around the dwelling and the attached decks, no combustible materials. You know, for the landscape, 5 to 30 feet. Again, you know, looking at connectivity of vegetation, making sure your trees are limbed, so that you don't have fuel ladders that can spread from the outlying part of your property and spread to your house. And I think the next slide might have an example of that. Oh, sorry, never mind. That's that slide after this. So let's get through actions 12 and 13. The next zone is that 30 feet to 100 feet from the structure. Again, it's just breaking your fuel ladders and creating gaps so that you don't have a hedge that runs all the way to the house. And then being aware of your slope, because when flames are coming up a slope, it's increasing your risk exponentially with those steep slopes. You want to be careful with that. And I believe the next slide shows some examples. I keep saying it does, but it doesn't, sorry. And these are the wildland urban interface codes that are focused specifically on your landscaping and your hardening of your property. And then hopefully the next slide is the example. There we go. So here's your example of the 0 to 5 feet from the structure. You know, it's going to make or break. You know, it is, as you can see here with this presentation that Amy was on, reducing that vegetation in that 0 to 5 feet zone nearly doubles the property wildfire survival rate. I know we like to have plants and vegetation around, but you know, make those pockets of vegetation further away from your house. Don't have your shrub growing right up to your eaves, or those little, people like to do the 2, I call them candle wicks, the 2 cedars on either side of your garage that grow and touch your roof. And then you've basically just created a wick that's going to take direct flames directly on your house.
So just the guy in the picture, there is Roy Wright, and he's currently the head of what we referred to earlier, IBHS, the Institute for Home and Business Safety, that puts these standards out. He used to run the National Flood Insurance Program. His family has a house, or had a house in Paradise. So he works out of Washington, D.C. And he is, because I think of his family having lost a home in Paradise. He has a particular real drive to work with United policyholders and others to get these wildfire risk reduction standards into place. So, that is, and as I was saying earlier, we need his organization, we need IBHS to come out with their standards, and they've said they're gonna do that by the I don't know about by the end of the year, but they have floated some kind of loose concepts. And again, you heard like United policyholders, we just didn't want to wait anymore. So we got all these experts together and we spent the last year powwowing. We came up with this list of 13 and we've thrown it out there. We've given it to Roy and his team. And so far, it is looking like they're going to kind of grab a lot of what's on our list when they put out their recommendation. But there's one thing I want to mention, and we kind of passed it over, but I do want to mention it. We passed this section when we were talking about features and materials. So the one area where we think they may not go with ours is on siding. We tried to be pragmatic about what's realistic for existing homes, right? Not new, but existing homes, right? To do, like, is it realistic to think that people are going to rip all the siding off or replace all their siding? Not realistic for most people, right? But we think that it's possible that IBHS is going to say, you have to have non-combustible siding in order to have your house be classified as a wildfire prepared home. So I'm here to say that if you're thinking about doing that groovy horizontal wood thing that a lot of homes have, and you're thinking about doing wood siding, chances are that's going to knock you out of qualifying as a wildfire prepared homes. I just felt like I needed to throw that in there. Because I'm worried that they're going to come out with that. So back to the methods here. You want to? This is a great illustration, Val.
Yeah. And this is exactly what we're talking about. It's I think this was the Tubbs fire, and this is a home that survived, and it survived because of what they did from the 5 to 30 feet. You can see it burned around. They had a slope there, but because there was no vegetation to catch and carry it to the house, the home site was actually protected. And I think the next slide will go the 30 to 100 feet.
There we go.
Oh, wait, no, the importance of defensive. Yeah. So sorry. So, and this is looking at, how much it matters, right? So here's a property that survived the Woolsey fire, and they, where again, they removing that fuel from around the house, more than a third of the properties could have reduced their chances of destruction by 50%. And if you have half the area within 5 feet covered by vegetation, it's 3 times as likely as not to be impacted by the fire. So, again, we have this vision of what we want our home to look like. And that includes that landscaping and all of that. But if you're going to put all that effort into making that envelope of the house as wildfire prepared as possible, please take that next step and look at the home site and how you can make all of that work to protect that investment you're making as you rebuild. And then our next slide, I hope, is the there we go. So, so these are just some vegetation, landscape management practices that have protected homes across the years. So one's in California, one's in Colorado. Again, it doesn't quite look maybe the way you envision your home, but these are homes that survived wildfires because of the work done.
So is there a difference? This says here non-combustible stucco. Is there combustible stucco and non-combustible stucco?
No, but there is, I know on the SIPs, they make a rubberized product that you can spray on. It's called Prestige, is one brand. And it has a Class A fire rating because they spray it on like a 1/4 inch thick. And, that might be kind of going back to what you were talking about for people with, existing homes trying to harden them. They do have some elastomerics that meet, which would be an expensive paint job versus new siding.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a good kind of the guide that you can consult on re-landscaping with an eye toward resiliency.
And each state's going to have something similar. If you go to your Landscape Architects Association for your state or your local area, they usually have a breakout of like water wise and other and native plants, and they'll give you that breakout of what is less flammable and what's more water wise.
Okay, one more deep breath. We've gotten most of the way there. We're just going to do a little bit more on back to this idea of, okay, there's some cool alternative maybe materials or approaches you want to take, but how are you going to pay for them if you're underinsured? And one way is to say that they are code upgrades, that they are going to be required by your locality under your local building code, and therefore your insurer has to pay up to your code upgrade coverage limit. So, the trick with getting your insurer to pay for code upgrades is generally to give them some evidence. And again, most adjusters that are assigned to your claims are going to be fairly overloaded. A lot of them, they're not going to want to go digging into the local code. You're going to have to do that and to show them what kind of things you may need to be doing on your project that are qualified as code upgrades. And this is an example from our website of how you can break out the increased costs due to compliance with local building codes. And it's been our experience, and these are samples that you'll find on our website in our samples section, uphelp.org/samples. And a lot of the time you've got to do some homework. Sometimes your builder can help you, but and in general, Carrie, Barry, we usually tell people, that your builder should be familiar with the codes in the area and should be able to tell you. But is that, is there anything you'd add to that advice, Barry or Carrie?
The problem is, I think it's partially a scheme for full employment, is the process of getting a permit drags on and on and on.
Yeah.
And if you want to shorten that, simplify and come prepared. They don't have PhDs at the desk.
Right. So Carrie and Barry, is it reasonable to expect your builder to be able to help you document code upgrades, or do you think is that above?
Yeah, to an extent, depending on how much.
Right.
And I know Paradise went full out because of the amount of loss, but we're getting, once you submit plans, we're getting them back in a week to 10 days to permit.
Yeah.
That's because you've developed trust.
No,
Yeah.
Everybody. It's just because of what went on here. They've hired so many people, they're ripping them through. But when I was in Sonoma County, it could take 6 months to get a set of plans.
Yep. So, most jurisdictions, it's not too hard to do the research and find out. I should say most jurisdictions where there's been a wildfire, they will typically within, a couple months of the fire, the local building department will publish some kind of a list of common code upgrades. That's something that Sonoma did.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It doesn't always happen, but like in Colorado, I know in Boulder they do. And so this kind of brings us to kind of the end of the substance and just a reminder back to the whole insurance process. And we had years ago, before all this wonderful advances in knowledge of what you can incorporate into a construction project with an eye toward resiliency. Before all that, people were looking more at rebuilding green, and we had a whole program where we would walk people through, if you want to rebuild a LEED certified house. I think these days people are much more focused on cost containment, cost efficiency, and building with an eye toward risk reduction. But it was very similar in the approach that people take when they want to rebuild green, very similar to the approach of when you want to rebuild a wildfire prepared home, which is that you've got to, it's an art, right? The art of negotiation, to negotiate with your insurance company, assuming they're keeping they haven't just cut you a check and sent you off to do whatever you want. But if they're keeping their hands on it and not paying full replacement value until you establish you've hit certain milestones, you've got to be negotiating to document code upgrades and to document that the materials and methods that you want to use either cost the same or might even be more cost efficient. Is that, Barry, in terms of like your methodology, how does it compare sort of cost wise to like a stick build?
When you talk about all inclusive costs, which have to do with the things that just normally happen, adding to the costs, and those don't get codified for some reason, but they exist. You eliminate delays. The roof goes on and the dwelling is enclosed, which gives a better working environment for the final mechanical and electrical to be done, because that doesn't ship very well. Drywall doesn't ship at all. And so certain things have to be done locally. And so by eliminating delay, by making a very, very energy efficient, because no joints are allowed to not get spray foamed. We spray foam all joints. So the end result, you have to pump in fresh air, which is great for people with breathing problems. Yeah. Or you'd suffocate because they are airtight.
Yep.
And so all of that, if you include the real costs over time, and maybe at the end of the useful life of the dwelling, an energy efficient home is going to be, codes are going to eliminate non-energy efficiency. That's happening as we talk.
Yep.
So the homes that are being built now or have been built are going to have to be redone, rebuilt to be sold in years to come. And an energy efficient place that has better living conditions in it and is flexible to change, doesn't have a lot of walls that are not movable, can be made to appeal to a wider buyer. So that's an upgrade also, that it should, and again, who knows, but hopefully the world still exists when these homes are ready to be sold, and they will be sold someday probably, or a freeway comes through and they're bulldozed. And so the fact that all the components used are reusable, they should go for 100 years, and there's no penalty for that. So all those costs, if you really get down to the real actual costs over the years, we're under any other method of building that we found. but the initial cost might be more. Because it's a better level of material, strength, etc. So
This is a perfect point here that you've got to, I think what I hear Barry saying is, some of the materials themselves may be more expensive, but if you factor in, and this is the art of negotiation, you got to document the time you got to be able to anticipate arguments, and be ready with a counter. Oh, well, but this project can be done faster, with less margin for error. So that's helpful. And I'm sorry, Barry, is there something you want to add?
I've never met an insurance company that likes to write checks. They will put you through purgatory
They will.
to try to beat you down.
Yes.
And they're not nice guys. They're paid. I think they get bonuses for bringing the costs down and under what the fair negotiated price should be.
Yes.
They don't
Sure seems that way.
have a conscience.
Yes. Well, that's why we exist, right? One of the things that led to the establishment of United Policyholders was an adjuster, whistleblower coming out after the Loma Prieta earthquake in '89 in California and saying, hey, the insurance company that she was working for was lowballing people on their claims. And then at the end of every week, they were rewarding the adjuster that closed the most files.
You bet.
With a case of beer or whatever. Anyway, that's a perennial problem, and that's exactly what we're here to help you guys overcome. Carrie, you talked about the how, and we know how so many people affected by the Camp Fire were underinsured severely, and we're not going to be able to do 400, or they didn't have $400-500 a square foot, even $350 a square foot in insurance. So tell us a little bit about the approach that you have taken to try to rebuild with cost efficiencies.
The main thing that we're doing is going with we had a couple houses that the insurance money was plentiful, and those were kind of a no-brainer. Do your plans, get them done. So far, doing the SIP, and with also the long-term benefit of the Title 24, you get more windows. They're, like Barry was saying, every seam is sealed, you're pumping air in, but you've got 70% less, energy usage on the house. That goes on forever, and so for people that, don't have money, and a lot of people had a mortgage, and by the time they pay that mortgage off, they've got to try to get a construction loan. I mean, it gets really dicey. And I have found at this point, we've been real open to trying new technologies. We're working with this company, Aerated Homes, and they're from Canada, and they did this for years there. They moved here and opened up their manufacturing plant here, and now they're doing these houses. And you were saying, like, the 3D houses, they actually do cut everything with a CNC lathe. So everything is very specific, and they can get me closed in cheaper than I can stick build it or sub out, the framing, the concrete. Plus we have the long-term energy efficiency. So, I think everybody needs to be just kind of open to, all these new technologies and really feel out the different things that are out there. Yep. And find something that's a good fit for each, situation and each person. But you were talking about straw bale earlier, and SIPs are kind of the new straw bale because you don't have the rotting issues if there's water penetration. Not that there's anything wrong with straw bale. There's some fantastic homes, but anyway.
Except it always makes me think of the three little pigs, but okay.
Yeah, but anyway, but SIPs are kind of, you're getting that same R value instead of 2 feet wide, you're getting it in 6 inches because of what they're doing. And so anyway, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And we're just trying to be innovative. Where can we save money? We're trying to, cut our, construction waste down. The SIPs, they generate 30% less waste. That's huge. I mean, that's not only green, it's, not as much labor. And, we're just kind of, we try to get the best prices we can. Thank God they're going back down on lumber. That was getting pretty scary at over $100 a sheet for 3/4 inch CDX. I was like,
Yeah.
And so, pretty much that's what we're doing. We're just kind of, trying to be willing to look at new technologies, and just kind of be open to it and do a lot of research, and then share that knowledge as much as we can with other people when we find something that works.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that knowledge with us, and both of you very much. And
You're very
here's some
welcome.
additional resources for you. And again, we will be posting the slide deck on our website by the end of this week. We want to thank the funders that have made it possible for us to bring you this information today. And in both in California and Colorado, Washington and Oregon. For those of you who are still having insurance issues, we always like to remind you that there is a free resource in addition to our organization, the California Department of Insurance for people in our state. In Oregon, you've got the Division of Consumer and Business Services. They have toll-free numbers, and here's Colorado. All 3 states, Colorado, California, Oregon, and 4 actually, Washington. So 4 states have pro-consumer insurance commissioners in place at this time that really do want to help you if they can. Those are free resources for you for resolving insurance matters. I think that brings us to the end of our deck. I want to again thank my team, Val, Elise Hicks, who was helping on answering questions, Carolyn Winter, and then our special guests, Barry and Carrie. Thank you so much for your expertise and time.
Amy, real quick about Carrie. She is not a typical contractor. Most contractors
Thank you,
are
Barry.
highly resistant to change.
That's
Yeah,
a really
well-
important, that's an important point to end on. We hope you all find a contractor as open-minded as Carrie. I know Carrie certainly has some references in Paradise. And we know that it can be very hard to find a good builder after a wildfire, a lot of competition, but hopefully over time, things always do seem to sort of sort themselves out. And if you can be patient, we are rooting for you. Our organization is here to help. And thank you all again for your time. Signing off. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.